letting us know. And there we go. And so, if you are just tuning in now, I'm happy to welcome you. My name is Jay Frost, and this, of course, is the Philanthropy Mastermind series brought to you by DonorSearch. You won't be hearing anything else about DonorSearch for the next little bit, unless, of course, our presenters today mention it for some reason. But I do want to give a shout out to them because they've been kind enough to provide a platform where, since 2016, we've had people who are leaders throughout the field talk to us about the things that matter to them, and most especially to you. And we certainly have that today with the two presenters who have been here multiple times before, but particularly Amy Eisenstein is doing a special series. She's done this over the last couple of months where she's been kind enough to present in our podcast series, so you can hear that wherever you get your podcasts. Also, our webcast series, which are conversations, much like I'm doing right now, but also these webinars where you can get CFRE credit just as you can today. So if you're collecting those credits, do grab this one. You'll want it. Most importantly, beyond the credits is the fact that we have two people who are leaders in the field of fundraising in general, but specifically campaigns. And every single organization, whether you like it or not, is going to go through one. The question is, are you going to have what it takes to do it? Well, you will have a little bit more of that after just today's presentation. We have Amy Eisenstein. So first of all, welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
Amy is a consultant, author, speaker, and a CEO and co-founder of the Capital Campaign Toolkit. We'll make sure that you have information on that towards the end of the presentation today, so you can check out that link and their work. Her books include Major Gift Fundraising for Small Shops, Raising More with Less, and 50 Asks in 50 Weeks, my favorite title of those. She's an ACFRE holder, as you probably know, and she appears all over the place. So you can find her, and again, not only in this series, but both the content that she's produced for the toolkit, but also across the web, lots of different content. Another name for another presenter who just came in today, we're so happy that she's here, is Andrea Kihlstedt. Andrea. If you don't know Andrea's work, shame on you. You're going to know more about it now. Andrea is definitely one of the foremost experts in the area of capital campaigns, and she's been doing that for, I'll just put it this way, a bit of time. So among her books, in addition to being co-founder of the Capital Campaign Toolkit, I want to say that, and other companies previously, by the way, which I will not mention unless she chooses to do so, her books include Capital Campaign Strategies That Work, How to Raise $1 Million or More in 10 Bite-Sized Steps. They have the greatest titles in the field. And Train Your Board and Everyone Else to Raise Money, which I just happen to have on my desk. So proof that when you want to know what you're doing, you get books from the best. And two of them are here right now to talk with you about how to plan an effective capital campaign using new tools and technology. That's enough for me. I'm going to turn it over to these two great guests and come in toward the end. Again, welcome and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you for having us, and thank you to DonorSearch. So listen, I am so thrilled to have everybody starting to chat in the chat box. So I want to encourage you to open up your chat box and let us know who you are, where you're calling in from, what organization you're with, and where in the country or the world that you are. We love to see that and keep saying hello. So thank you so much for getting us started doing that. We didn't even have to ask Andrea. So today we're going to be talking about how to plan an efficient and effective capital campaign using new tools and technology. And I want to share, some very new, brief, maybe it's not so new, but it's technology. And that is that you can have our checklist and guide to step-by-step guide to capital campaigns by texting checklist to the number on your screen. So I'll give you 10 seconds to take a screenshot of that, or go ahead and text it right now to yourselves. I have the QR code. I don't know why I forgot to put it up. Maybe by the end of this, we'll put up a QR code and you can do it quickly, but go ahead and you can just text to get a step-by-step guide and free checklist for a capital campaign. So first example of how you might use technology. All right, so I'm so delighted to see everybody texting in. Andrea and I are going to go back and forth, but first we're going to start with a quick question and just in the chat box. So if you haven't opened your chat box yet, this is your chance. We want to know where you are in your capital campaign. So are you just thinking about it? You can just do A, B, C, or D. Feasibility study stage is B, soliciting leadership level gifts. Or D is public phase. So where are you in your capital campaign? Okay, excellent. So good. Oh my gosh, A's, B's, C's, a few D's, mostly A's and B's. All right, good. We've got people all over the board and we are going to get started. So Andrea, what are we talking about today? We've got 3 things on our agenda. You want to get us started?
Yes, we actually have 2 things on our agenda, Emma, but we've broken one of them up. We're going to start by talking about new tools and technology. And then we're going to talk about how to prepare for a capital campaign. And then we're going to talk about more new tools and technology. So by the time you get through this, by the time we finish this, there is one idea that I really want to have stick in your mind. And I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to say it again, which is that the reason to be up to date on new tools and technology is because they will make you more efficient. They will make you make better use of your time. They will make you simplify your life so you can do a better job of all of the things that can gobble your time if you don't use them. But the purpose of all of that is so that you will have more time to spend with your donors. You will have more high touch rather than high tech time. So we're really happy to talk to you about new tools and technology, about high tech, about how to use it, about what we found works. But keep in mind that the reason for that is not just the tools and the technology themselves, but the fact that capital campaigns are at their very heart and very essence, high touch fundraising enterprises. And that's the purpose of using these great new tools and technology.
Excellent. I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, so let's dive in. We're gonna start off here today with some new tools and tech. So first, I mean, Andrea just laid it out. Why technology, right? This is across the board. This is for your personal life, your work life, your capital campaign. Technology, they're supposed to save you time and money and make your life more effective and more efficient. If they're not doing that, then you probably have the wrong technology. Oh, somebody's so kind as to sharing the text number. So text, what was it? Now I can't even remember. I'll go back to that slide. Checklist. Okay, Beverly, thank you. Okay, thank you for sharing that. So we're gonna talk about the obvious things about technology, but really important to make sure that you're running your life, your work life, your personal life as smoothly, as effectively, and efficiently as you can be. And there's got to be time savings and or money savings. And as Andrea said, you want to be as efficient and effective as you can be going into a capital campaign, because a campaign is a high touch endeavor. So we're going to start with the most obvious one. We're on it right now, and that is Zoom. And, you know, we would be remiss, I think, if we didn't mention Zoom, but it's so obvious. The question is to mention it or not. But the reality is that with COVID, we all learned that we can communicate with donors, with committees, with board members over Zoom. And, you know, there's a time and a place to be sitting in front of a donor face to face or with a committee in front of you, but there is a level of effectiveness, of efficiency to meeting remotely. There's no driving, there's no parking, there's meetings, you know, whether people are in town or out of town. So I would encourage you, I think my really most important message is that don't assume that just because we can, that we should go back to meeting in person. I want you to choose to meet in person when it is beneficial for the purpose of the meeting. And sometimes that is not the case, even though, you know, so COVID may be an issue, COVID's not an issue. If and when you can be in person, I don't want you to default to meeting in person because you think you should, quote unquote. I want you to do it because it is more effective. And when it's more effective and efficient to meet on Zoom, do that.
You know, I think it's so interesting what's happened, Amy. Amy and I started the Capital Campaign Toolkit a couple of years before COVID. And the idea was always to set it up as a virtual company. And people would look at us cross-eyed and say, well, you can't run campaigns virtually, right? That's not going to work. And then COVID came. Of course, it turns out that you really can do a huge amount of things virtually, particularly now when pretty much everybody knows comfortably how to use Zoom, no matter what their age. Right? I mean, occasionally we have funny things that happen on Zoom. For example, the donor who was on one of my lead gift committee calls that I'm on periodically, and it took me a while to be looking at all those Hollywood squares. And I was looking at one of them that looked odd, and it was an older woman who's sharp as a tack, a lead gift donor who's on this lead gift committee. She's sharp as a tack. And I kept wondering, what am I seeing? All of a sudden I realized I was seeing the inside of her ear. Right? Because she couldn't quite figure out where on her phone the camera was, right? That's exactly. So sometimes people get it a little wrong, but the reality is that even this donor loves Zoom. She's a woman well up in her 80s. She can't figure out how to use the camera right, but it doesn't matter a hoot to her. So don't make assumptions about whether people like or don't like Zoom. It works. And we, as Amy said, we don't want to get rid of it. We don't want to throw it out because we think it's second best, when in fact, in many cases, it turns out to be first best.
Yeah. So I just want to reemphasize, I mean, you said it, Andrea, we started the Capital Campaign Toolkit a couple years before COVID started, and we run a remote and virtual campaign consulting firm. And we are rarely or never in the room with our clients. And you are just wrapping up a campaign for $15 million and you have never met the people. You've talked to them over Zoom for 3 years.
Right.
And
actually, on Saturday, this past Saturday, I went to their town. I took a train up and I took a train back, and I actually went because they had the groundbreaking for their campaign that I have been working on now with them for 3 years. And it was so interesting to meet people. You realize that you don't know how tall people are, right? Or how short they are. There's so much you don't know about them. And everybody was so happy for the moment to actually be able to touch one another, right? To do fist bumps or elbow bumps or even an occasional hug. And that made it feel very special in a way that wouldn't have felt if we had been meeting in person all this time.
Yeah. All right, good. Let's go to some of our favorites. And Sandy, you asked the question about the text number, and people put it in the chat box. I just want to make sure that you saw that there. All right, so let's go on to some of the other technology. We started with Zoom. Trello. I'd love to know in the chat box who uses Trello or what else you use. It's a planning tool. It's an organizational planning tool for big projects. And, Shelley's saying Asana, Casey loves Trello. This is a campaign is a huge project. So you want to use something to organize yourself. And Trello is just one example of how you can plan out different phases, different timelines, different projects, to-do lists, all on an app. You can share the project with committees on Trello. So great examples coming in the chat box. So the other thing is Dropbox. I will say, it's interesting. A couple years ago, we started with Google Docs and we found that it didn't work for our team. I don't know why. Lots of people love Google Docs. We switched to Dropbox. It works better for us. So there's not one right technology for everybody, but you want to be able to share and exchange documents. We're living in 2022, right? There's no excuse for your committee, for your team not to have logins to be able to share documents, make edits back and forth. So just some very, very basic ones.
Yeah, one of the things that we did when we created the toolkit, which has about 130 downloadable documents in it, and it took us quite some time to work on all of those. I would develop something and send it on to Amy. She would develop something and send it on to me. And what we came to was a combination of using Trello and Dropbox, where we would link to the document in Dropbox in the Trello file. So sometimes the various apps can talk to one another, or you can use multiples of them to make things very efficient so that you're not constantly losing or having to hunt and find things, but they're right there where you need them, when you need them. And that's a huge time saver. Yeah, someone said the Google Docs integrates with Slack. We also use Slack. Is that on our list someplace?
It is on our list. Yes, it is. So Slack, is a communication tool for teams, right? So listen, everybody's put great examples in the chat. I want to use these examples, and I want to tell you a quick story about Calendly too. There's no right or wrong technology for your team. I'm just giving examples. There's more examples in the chat. I would encourage you to use at least or try 1 or 2 new apps, services, technologies a year. Try something new. It may work, it may not work. That's fine until you find things that are effective and efficient. I want to point out Calendly for a minute. So Calendly is a scheduling app. I'm sure lots of you use it. We started using it, 18 months ago or so. And Andrea and I were both a little hesitant. I thought this is going to screw up our calendars. Andrea, you were worried that it was going to take away some of the personal interaction between our clients. Going back and forth scheduling, you go back and forth on email lots of times. You know what it did for us? First of all, it didn't screw up our calendars. It has made scheduling so effective and efficient that we have more time, quality time to spend with clients instead of going back and forth with calendars. I would estimate that Calendly saves me, I think, 100 hours a year, 2 hours a week going back and forth with people on email. And that's what technology should do for you. It should give you more time. It should give you peace of mind. So lots of good suggestions in the chat.
So, there are a couple of other things to think about. I mean, as Amy said, we weren't all in agreement about Calendly. And in fact, we have found some other things hard to implement. We have a growing team at the toolkit, and these systems only work as well as the people who use them, right? So if you have things in Dropbox and people aren't actually putting things in Dropbox, or they're only sporadically using Dropbox, it's not going to work. So it's one thing to have the technology to decide on what systems you'd like to use. It's quite something else to actually work with the people on your team to try it out, to get people behind it, to make sure people are willing to give it a try and see if it's going to work, right? Otherwise, all that time, energy is just wasted when it's done in a sort of half-baked sort of way, which I must confess that I periodically have to reprimand myself about. Right, when I haven't put something in the Dropbox or that I should have. So, just like, how many people have CRMs that they only know a quarter of what they can use it for, right? Of DonorSearch, how many people only use a little bit of what's available in those systems? And I think that's on all of us. If we really are going to spend the money and to implement some of these things, we have to think carefully about the human part of it. How do we get people who are stuck in their ways and who's not stuck in their ways, right? How do we get people who are stuck in their ways to get a little unstuck? Can we offer prizes for people who use it best? Can we do little seminars? What can we do in order to actually get it to become a habit in our workplaces? And I think that's often a piece of practice that we underestimate the importance of.
If you're going to try out a new technology with your campaign committee, ask them for suggestions. What do they use? What do they love? Instead of trying to teach them something new, you learn something new. But I just feel like that's why, you don't want to try 10 new technologies in a year, but 1 or 2 new, whether it's an app, a service, whatever it is, a website, every single year, so that you can get more and more effective. All right, so we talked about sort of time and organization effectiveness in terms of technology, because that's so critical for a campaign, that you're organized, that you communicate well, that you do have good time management. That's what the first section of technology was about. Now we're going to spend some time talking about how to get ready and prepare for a campaign. Some of it uses technology, some of it really is old school. Most of it's old school. And then towards the end of the hour, we're going to get back into the technology that's campaign specific. So the first section of technology was really about how to make your life and your work more effective and efficient. The second part of our technology conversation will be more campaign specific. So let's talk about how to prepare for a campaign. That's the crux of this conversation. So Andrea, just generally, why would an organization have a campaign? I think everybody knows, but let's state the obvious anyways.
There are so many reasons, but one of them is that when you do a capital campaign, it raises everybody's sights. Right? We tend to get stuck in the numbers of annual fundraising campaigns. We tend to think that just because people give us $1,000 or $5,000 a year, that's all they can give us. When we do a capital campaign, all of a sudden we learn that the same people who give us $1,000 might well give us $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million. So a capital campaign raises sights, but we don't do it specifically for that reason. We do a capital campaign periodically in the life of an organization because it enables us to boost the organization's ability to carry out its mission. It provides an opportunity for a quantum leap, if you will, or a springboard, is a phrase we sometimes use, to say, all right, we're carrying out our mission at this level, but let's do some planning. And if we could invest a certain amount of money in a fairly short period of time, we could do our work at this level. That's a reason to do a capital campaign. And in the process of doing that, we're going to understand, we're going to come to learn that the very same people who give us money year in, year out could probably, or some of them can give us significantly more.
Excellent. All right. So we're going to go now through a campaign timeline, and we've broken down a campaign into 7 phases. You've probably heard of some of these. Certainly the quiet phase and the public phase are fairly well known, but let's just look at a campaign broken down into 7 phases. We strongly believe that when you break things down into doable, achievable chunks and steps, they become much more manageable. And a campaign is one of those huge, enormous endeavors, fundraising undertakings, that if you look at it as a whole, it seems really frightening. But once you break it down, it becomes much more manageable. All right, so pre-campaign planning. So this is when you will figure out what your project plans are. What are you doing? And that leads into your campaign objectives. What will you accomplish? Your working goal is how much those campaign objectives and project plans will cost. So how much do you think they'll cost? And it's time to put pen to paper and draft that first case for support. Nothing fancy, no campaign brochure, just a Word document that's a draft case for support of why people should care and why they should give and be excited about this project. You'll also want to develop a gift range chart, which is how many gifts you need at what amounts to get to your campaign goal. You've probably also heard it called a gift table or a campaign pyramid. And then finally, a depth chart, which is a listing of potential donors, qualified prospective donors for each gift that you need in your gift table. And once you've done that pre-campaign planning, you're ready to go into feasibility study. Andrea,
I just want to talk about the pre-campaign planning for a minute, because it would be easy to think that it wasn't really part of the campaign. Right? It would be easy to sort of put it off to the side and say, well, the first thing you do in your campaign is the feasibility study. And I have sort of argued for a long time now that the pre-campaign planning is one of the most important parts of your campaign. Why? Because there is no better time to engage your major donors in the process than when you are in the planning stages of something. Once things become tied down and you really know clearly what it is you're going to do, you lose the most important opportunity to talk to people. So if you can involve some of your largest potential donors in this pre-campaign planning phase, then you are setting up the whole rest of your campaign for success. I think people often just overlook that idea. They think they have to wait until their everything is tied down before they talk to their largest donors. And that's just such a mistake. So have the courage to talk to your largest donors early in this phase.
I just want to also point out, whenever I can, a gift range chart should use technology. Sure, you can just take a pen to paper, absolutely. But a well-designed Excel spreadsheet, when you put in different gifts amounts, it will add to the total. And if you say, all right, well, what if we don't get 3 $1 million gifts, but we only get 2? How does that impact the gifts going down the gift range chart? And Excel will magically sort of calculate that and fill in the numbers. So, basic Excel spreadsheet, but technology nonetheless to sort of help you look at different scenarios. What if you do get that $5 million gift? What if you don't get it? Imagining different gift range charts with different gift levels, it will help you see quickly what you need to raise and what kind of gifts you need. All right, the second stage is feasibility study. And this, of course, is where you test your plan with your lead donors, discuss the case for support, and assess the giving potential. And, one example of a feasibility study where you might implement technology is in scheduling. One of the big pain in the necks of a feasibility study is getting those meetings, interviews scheduled. And so something like Calendly might be implemented to help you with that scheduling process. We're going to talk more about feasibility study in a few minutes, so I don't want to go too deep on that. Let's talk about campaign planning, which is after the feasibility study when you adjust your plans and you finalize your campaign plan based on what you learned in the feasibility study. You have an opportunity to revise your working goals. So you tested a goal in the feasibility study phase with your biggest potential donors. And based on what you heard, you might decide to increase your goal or scale back the project and decrease the goal at that stage. You'll want to finalize that case for support, again, based on feedback, and develop campaign plans. You want to add anything about that, Andrea?
Just to say that for those of you, I know many of you answered A or B, and when we asked you what stage of the campaign you're in, which means you're just thinking about it. And those of you who are thinking about it and considering a feasibility study, I just want to remind you that a feasibility study actually tests a plan. It doesn't, in an abstract way, find out how much money your organization can raise. It actually goes out and discusses a very specific plan of action, a plan with your prospective donors. So don't get the cart before the horse with that. You actually do have to have a plan first, and then you do the feasibility study. After the feasibility study, then you can go and have a campaign plan that is informed by your feasibility study conversations.
Excellent. All right, quiet phase. This is where you raise the bulk of the money for your campaign. As you can see, it can take anywhere from 6 to 24 months, depending on how well you know your donors. But here you're going to solicit 3 groups. You're going to solicit the leadership gifts at the top of your gift range chart. You're going to solicit your board members and your campaign volunteers. So if you are lucky, those 3 groups will get you to 65, 75, or even 85% of your goal. Then you're going to do a campaign kickoff. And that is when you are going to, once again, you have an opportunity to adjust your goal up or down. You haven't officially announced your campaign goal yet in a brochure or in a press release or in any formal way. You've been using a working goal, or a draft goal during this whole quiet phase of your campaign, and you're finally ready to announce your goal, do a press release, and do some sort of kickoff celebration. All right, Andrea, why don't you talk about the public phase?
Yes, so I just want to talk for a minute about the quiet phase and how it relates to the public phase, because there are a lot of misconceptions about that. The quiet phase of the campaign is not part of a campaign where you can't talk about the project, right? People think that you have to be whispering, right? That you can't tell people about the project. Really, the difference between the quiet phase and the public phase is that you have not yet published a final goal. During that quiet phase of your campaign, the goal is still a working goal. You're testing your goal. You're waiting to see how those largest gifts come in, how the board gifts come in, before you actually announce a campaign goal to the public, because you don't want to fail. And one of the ways to keep from failing is to adjust the goal up or down in accordance with what it is you learn as you've asked for those largest gifts. So when you get to the kickoff, as Amy said, you are announcing the goal. Then you have what is a remarkably short period for the public phase of the campaign, which is full of lots of energy and razzle dazzle and press and communications and all kinds of excitement and broad-based fundraising, but it's remarkably short. Right? We prefer it not to be longer than 3 months or 4 months, or if you have to go a little longer, but you can't sustain that level of energy for terribly long. And then it feels like it falls flat. So hang on to your quiet phase as long as you can, solicit as many of your largest gifts during that quiet phase, and then do as fast and energetic and exciting a public phase as possible. Then, of course, you have this long, what might feel like a sloggy sort of, what are we calling it, Amy? The follow-up phase.
Post-campaign?
Post-campaign phase.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that, Amy?
Yeah. So in post-campaign, you're going to celebrate. You're done. You did it. You want to express gratitude. Of course, send pledge reminders, do some debriefing, all of that good stuff as you let the campaign come to a close. But you don't want to skip this step. Celebrating, thanking your donors and your volunteers. It's critically important. All right.
Let's pause for just a second and answer some of these questions, because they're relevant. Yep. They're relevant here. Someone sort of wanted a little more information about what is a depth chart? What do we mean by a depth chart? And it's really a very simple idea where you take the information in your gift range chart, which says how many gifts you need at different levels. And you say, well, all right, who are the names of the people that we might solicit at each of those levels? And you make a very simple chart, a very simple set of columns where the amount of the gift is at the top of the column. And then you slot in the people you can solicit at those various levels. If you do that, you're going to see pretty quickly whether you have enough prospects for each of those gifts that you need in the gift range chart. So that's what we call a depth chart. And together, the gift range chart and the depth chart are two really remarkable campaign tools. They're not fancy, they're not high tech, but boy, are they ever effective. And then somebody also wants to know what we mean by campaign volunteers. We believe that campaigns should be volunteer heavy, which is that you should use a whole series of task forces or work groups to help with various aspects of the campaign. You might have a pre-campaign, a core committee that works on the pre-campaign plan. You might have a small group that comes together and helps organize the feasibility study or oversee the feasibility study. You probably have a lead gift committee. Then you probably have a campaign steering committee. All of these, many of them are short-term. They don't go on for the duration of the campaign. But the reason it's so important is because the more involved people are, particularly if you involve the people who can give significant gifts, the more those people are likely to give. And if at the end of a campaign, I've seen this multiple times, you go back through and you say, well, how many of the people who have given to this campaign actually volunteered on the campaign? If the campaign was done right, the results of that, the results of that are overwhelming, right? Some 50, 60, 70% of the people who have given gifts to your campaign will have had an opportunity will have actively, participated or volunteered in your campaign. Okay.
Excellent. All right. Another quick little poll for the chat box. What's your working goal? So 1 is for under $1 million. If you know your working goal yet, if you're just thinking about it, you may or may not know. But what's your campaign goal? What are you thinking of raising? We just want to get a sense of who's on the line here. So, all right, we've got campaigns of all sizes, big, small, medium. Excellent. All right. Okay, let's keep going while you fill that in. So I bet you're curious, if you have not started to plan this yet, or you're just thinking about it, you want to know, where will the money come from? So let's talk about that. The money is going to come from, more than 50% of the money will come from your top donors, right? So that may surprise people. I want to make sure that you really focus on that. This is not a crowdsourcing campaign. This is not a direct mail campaign. This is a campaign that's strategic and focused on the top donors. You will solicit the base once you get to the public phase, but the vast majority of your fundraising will come from your top donors. Let me just make sure that I didn't skip it. Okay, sorry. Thought I might have skipped a slide here, but I didn't. All right, so let's look at, so we have to figure out where we're going to find these donors and where these donors are going to come from. So let's just do a little high tech, low tech type of donor identification. So donor research, right? So DonorSearch, they're the ones hosting this webinar. You may want to do some wealth screening and donor research, and you're going to use everything from Google to a wealth screening company that crawls the internet and gets all sorts of information in one usable, readable place. That's technology that we're going to be using for donor research. I mean, something as simple as Google, that's technology. You also are going to look at the history of giving of your current donors, and you need to have them in a donor database where you can run those reports accurately and effectively. If you're using a donor database that's not working for you, or you can't get information out of, or people aren't able to put it in effectively, it's not going to work for your campaign. So these are some very basics. Low tech, high touch, you're going to have interviews and conversations with people. So talking to them about your campaign and whether or not they want to be involved and supportive. So those are things that can't be outsourced to technology, but how do you use technology leading up to those responses? All right, Andrea, I'm going to look, there's a lot going on in the chat. Let me pause. You want to say anything else about this?
Sure. So I'm in favor of using all of the current technologies available to figure out, excuse me, who your donors are, where to pay attention. But in my mind, the best way to find out about donors is to ask them about themselves. And it's remarkable to me, it has been all the years I've been in this business, how much people are willing to tell you and are eager to tell you and are happy to tell you about themselves and their ability to give. If you just ask, right? So by all means, be guided by the information that's available, right? To you. There undoubtedly will be some surprises in that, but don't overlook the facts that donors may not want you to know everything about them, for starters, but they will want you to know some things about them, and you should be asking them what they want to tell you. You should be asking them about themselves and their philanthropy and how they give and how they choose to give and why they give to you and whether they ever give really big gifts and where you fit in their list of organizations that you give to, right? You will learn more from those conversations, more useful information than from all of the tech all lined up together, right? and it's useful because the donor has told it to you.
So, it's important to know when to use technology and when to back off technology. You don't want to be a fundraising robot, which I think is the title of one of my colleagues' books. But anyways, all right. So you want to talk to your leadership level donors. And this is you're going to use technology to set up those meetings, to figure out who to talk to, but at the end of the day, you're going to talk to them. So we want to just share this capital campaign formula: 20 gifts for 70% of the goal from 50 prospects. So they're really, capital campaigns are formulaic, and there's art and science and technology and personal interaction. And I think it's the cross section that really gets you to a successful campaign.
Amy, there's some chat about crowdsourcing and how frustrating it is when some younger donors or younger board members want to go to crowdsourcing, where they think they can do an ice bucket challenge, or they think they can just put something out on a Kickstarter like platform and campaign. So I've had some experience with Kickstarter over the years, and it's been fascinating to watch. What I see in the experience I've had is that Kickstarter or campaigns like that do best when they're run like traditional capital campaigns, right? When you solicit the largest gifts first offline, and then you get those people to put their gifts into the Kickstarter platform to show that there is momentum, and you build momentum, and then gradually you work down your list of people that you're soliciting. That makes it very easy to collect the money on a platform like Kickstarter. But the reality is that people don't just flock to you because you've put up a website. That's not in fact what happens.
Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes I see is when people put up a thermometer and it's 0. Right? Nobody
right.
wants to be the first gift. If it looks like you have a long way to go, their little gift won't make a difference, which is why you want to do those things with gifts already provided. The thermometer should be at 70 or 80% so that there's momentum and enthusiasm and excitement. And so, any of your board members or your young donors who want to do crowdfunding of any kind on any platform, tell them that's for the last 10% of the campaign. And you need to, even for the last 10%, get the first 10 or 20 donors who are going to get that thermometer up to 80% before we set it live. We'll have a private link where we'll make sure that thermometer goes up first. Don't let them set that thermometer live at 0. That is a huge mistake. It'll stay at 0. All right. So we got to move because I want to get to the second technology section. So, we're looking at donors who have the ability to give, who believe in your mission, and who have contact with your organization. That's the ABCs of looking at donors who are going to give those top 20 to 50 gifts who are going to get you way far in your campaign. All right, I'm going to zoom through feasibility studies just because I want to share it with you, but I really want to get back to the next section of technology.
Yeah, and those of you who are chatting in questions, put them in the Q&A box for us instead of in the chat. If the chat gets lost, it goes by quickly for us. But if you copy and paste your questions or things you'd like us to address and plop them in the Q&A box, we will address them. Okay.
Okay. I'm also going to post something. It's called, did I spell it right? Toolkit Talks. Check and see if I spelled it right, Andrea. Or somebody's going to click on it and tell me if I did. Every single week on Mondays, Andrea and I have sort of an office hours where we answer questions live. So if you don't get your question answered, you want to go to Toolkit Talks and join us any Monday in the next year, we will answer your questions live. All right. So test your chance for success. 2 feasibility study models. Part of this presentation is about getting ready for a campaign. And we feel so strongly that if you are doing a big campaign, you should test the case and the goal for a lot of reasons. I'm going to go through them quickly. If you have a board member who says, don't do a feasibility study, or let's skip it, or we're going to do a campaign anyways, here are the arguments to say, you know what, stop. Yes, we're going to do a campaign anyways, but a feasibility study will tell us how we're going to be successful and give us a roadmap and a plan. So it requires a clear plan. You can't go to donors with a vague plan. So it forces you to be clear. It engages prospective donors because you're going to go interview your top potential donors to talk to them about the campaign. It forces you to focus on the top donors because you can't interview hundreds of people. You're going to interview the top people. It clarifies your strengths and weaknesses as you get feedback from donors. It gives the board confidence that you can successfully do a campaign because you've talked to the top donors and the majority of them have given you a thumbs up, and you're doing real planning. It provides outside perspective because all those donors you talk to are going to give you feedback on your plan. You want to add anything?
Oh, it's just fun.
All right. Oh, and it's fun. All right. So 2 models, consultant-led. There was actually some chat about this earlier in the chat box. So I'm glad you can either hire a consultant to interview your donors, or you can do what we call a guided feasibility study and interview your donors on your own. Let's go through the 2 different models. So the consultant-led models, both of them have pros and cons. This one is where the outside consultant conducts the interviews. They are confidential and anonymous, which is potentially good and bad. It's not transparent. You don't know who said what. And so that can be problematic when you get back aggregated results and somebody said something bad about your organization, but you don't know who said what. It is expensive. You're paying for a consultant to do it. It is, of course, less time consuming for staff, and it builds, but the good news is it builds the board confidence. So you may want to do a consultant-led traditional feasibility study where you hire them to go talk to your biggest potential donors and they come back with a report of recommendations. On the other hand, you may want to consider what we call a guided feasibility study, which is more of a consultant and staff collaboration. So the staff conducts the interviews. That's one of the key differences in these 2 models. The staff conducts the interviews. And so they're fully transparent because you've asked your donors all of the questions. It's a really important, unique opportunity for donors to engage with staff, and I would say board members. Sometimes board members are doing some of the interviews, and really build those relationships prior to going into a campaign. It's more cost effective, but of course, it's time consuming for staff. But genuinely, I can't think of a better way for you to be spending your time prior to a campaign than out talking with donors. And the good news is it also builds staff and board confidence because, again, you've talked to those key donors before a campaign. So the reason that we share this is because we don't want you to go into a campaign without doing one of these 2 types of feasibility studies. It sets up your campaign for success. It doesn't determine whether or not you can do a campaign. It sets up your campaign for success and it helps you plan effectively and accurately. Okay.
Amy, we have some questions here that I think I can answer fairly quickly.
Great.
So Shauna has asked, what's a reasonable price to pay, timeline for a feasibility study? You know, Shauna, it depends. If you do a traditional study, it depends in part on the geography of your organization. If yours is a large national organization, for example, where you have donors all over the country, it's going to cost you more than if you were a small organization in one small community and you know, a consultant isn't going to have to travel. The rule of thumb that we always used to use for a fairly tight geography, small organization, was that the study would cost approximately $1,500 per interview. So if the consultant was going to do 30 interviews, for example, then the study might cost $45,000. Right? I'm not saying that they actually charge per interview, but it's a nice rule of thumb. It's a way to think about it. In some, it depends on where in the country you are. If you're here in New York, where I am, it's probably going to cost more. If you're in the middle of, Idaho, it may cost less. I don't know if that's true or not, but
and it depends. If you're using a big consulting firm, it's going to be more. If you're using a solopreneur, it might be less.
The next question is whether we've had experience with blended studies where some of the donors are interviewed by staff and some are interviewed by a consultant. And what we've done at the toolkit is to say to donors, if you would rather talk to a consultant than the staff person or the board member, we can arrange that. And it's amazing to me that only, I think, 2 donors have ever taken us up on that. That donors, we much more often hear that donors have thanked the organization for coming and talking to them and not having a consultant go and talk to them. So we've heard a lot of that. And occasionally a donor will want to talk, will have something that they feel ouchy about, so they'll want to talk to the consultant. Let's see, what do you see as the consultant's role in the guided study? So the consultant is actually very much a part of that process, because there's a fair amount to know in how to get ready for it, what questions to ask, how to conduct a good interview, what information to track, how to make sense of it, how to put a report together, how to craft recommendations, and then how to present the study results to the board so that it will have the same level of confidence. So it is very much a collaboration between our firm, between the firm, the professional support and the people who are doing the interviews. And it was
Andrea,
complicated to figure that out.
Let's keep going. It's a good question.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
What I would encourage you to do, if you pose a question that we don't get to today, because there's so many great questions, is email us. Either Amy at Capital Campaign Toolkit or Andrea at Capital Campaign Toolkit, and we will be happy to answer your questions after the webinar. All right, let's get to new tools and technology for campaign specific. So I just want to make sure that we get to this as advertised. So first question, I want you to ask yourself, does your consultant need to be in the room? So in years past, I think many people would have answered absolutely yes. I want to have you pose that to your committee and think about it. Is it an effective and efficient use of your time given the technology that we have today? It's like I'm sitting in the room next to you, Andrea's sitting in the room next to you. We're probably in a different state. We may even be in another country. So is it effective and efficient anymore to insist that your consultant has to be sitting at your conference room table? You may decide yes, you may decide no, but I don't want you to make assumptions. Sort of the same question for committee members. I think, we've always assumed that committee members need to be in the room. What we knew at the Capital Campaign Toolkit before COVID, but what COVID has proven to so many organizations is that the answer is no. When you run a bad committee meeting in person or on Zoom, it's a bad committee meeting. If you run a good committee meeting in person or on Zoom, it's a good committee meeting. And so, how often are you bringing your committee members together in person? When it's effective, when it's efficient, when it makes sense, maybe to do some bonding, but for regular committee members, let's be as effective and efficient as possible. Same thing goes for donors. What we have seen over the past 2 years is donors being solicited for 4, 5, 6, and 7-figure gifts virtually, remotely, effectively. Now, sometimes you're going to want to be in the room with them. Sometimes they're going to be across the country or across the world, and you don't need to wait for them to come back to your town or for you to fly out to meet them anymore. So I just want you to make sure you're not making assumptions, that you're using tools and technology when it's appropriate. All right, let's just look at some tools and tech. I know we have so many questions that people want us to answer, so we're going to turn to them in a minute. But think about these tools and technologies. Some of them you already use every day in your fundraising. Others of them you will invest in in order to do a successful campaign. And I think what's most important is that a campaign is a unique and important opportunity to elevate the functioning and the systems and the infrastructure of your fundraising efforts and office. And it's an opportunity for you to enhance your systems and infrastructure. Andrea, what do you want to add about that?
Yeah, capital campaigns are a wonderful opportunity to do that because they will be raising way more money than your organization has raised before. So the people making financial decisions are likely to say yes to investments in your infrastructure in a way that they don't in normal times when money feels much tighter.
Yeah, so I would like to stop for a second and ask everybody in the chat, what tools and technology, what apps, what systems are you using that you love? Only share the ones you love for anything that you're using campaign and fundraising related. I mean, you know, we went through donor CRMs. If you don't have a donor management system that's working for you, you absolutely need to upgrade before a campaign. You want to do wealth screening. If you're doing major gift fundraising in a big way, certainly a capital campaign, you want to do donor screening. Use something as simple as an iPad to share your case, your plans, your blueprints. You don't have to print things out. You can be sitting next to somebody. You can flash it on a screen. Stewardship videos, there's lots of examples. You can give tours now virtually, live or pre-recorded. There's so many apps and systems to do that. So I love seeing in the chat, everybody sharing what they love. So you can quickly, you know, jot down things to share. Somebody's asking for prices. I would encourage you to go to the website of any of these systems to look at prices. Andrea, Sherry's asking if there's any sense that donors will be comfortable sharing concerns or negative thoughts with staff during a feasibility study. And our sense of it is that yes, you know, honestly, just as much as with a campaign consultant, because often I've heard from donors, I'm not telling an outsider something. I want to talk to the staff. You know, I guess occasionally on both sides, donors don't want to share, but more often than not, we've found that they are more than happy to actually talk to somebody who works at the organization and who can do something about it. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's right. And but the people who are doing the interviews have to learn to draw those criticisms. They have to learn to make it okay in the course of the conversation for a donor to tell them what the things they aren't so keen on. So that's a question of training someone to get good at doing those interviews. Right. And of course, a donor may phrase negative feedback differently from what they would tell someone outside the organization. But honestly, if I were in an organization, I wouldn't want a strange consultant drawing criticism of my organization and then not be able to get it back to the organization to address. So I think there's a serious problem with the traditional model.
All right, we've gone through tools and tech. We hopefully talked about how to prepare for a campaign, all the things you need to do, your timeline, your feasibility study, and then we went quickly through new tools and tech for the campaign itself. You got lots of good examples in the chat. I want to encourage you. There's that texting to get the free guide and checklist again. If we didn't get to your questions, if you have more questions or want to discuss your campaign, we would love for you to visit us at capitalcampaigntoolkit.com. We'd happily give you a free strategy session and discuss your questions and talk to you about your campaign. Also, again, if you go to toolkittalks.com or to the Capital Campaign Toolkit website, you can sign up to have a Q&A session with us every single week. All right, let's answer one or two more questions, and then Jay's going to pop up and tell us that we ran out of time. All right.
You know, Amy, I'm struck that somebody wants to know information, tools and technology for the public phase. And it strikes me that this text link that you've used is something that an organization could use well during the public phase of a campaign, right? To get people to text you. We haven't talked at all about messaging. It's about communicating with people using messaging rather than email. how to communicate and how that's changed into new ways recently.
Yeah, texting, social media, the tech for the public phase, right, is the bulk solicitation. So it's email, it's crowdfunding, it's text to give. There's all sorts of technology that you could use in the public phase in terms of communication and for fundraising as well.
Right.
Excellent.
Let's see, what do we risk by going into a public phase with just 50% of the goal raised? Failure. Public failure. That's what you risk. Public failure, right? You don't want to go into the public phase, particularly if you're a small organization, unless you can account quite clearly for where the rest of the money is going to come from. So if you can tell us with a straight face that you know where the other 50% of the money is going to come from, and be really clear about it, then by all means do that. But most organizations can't do that until they get towards the end of their campaign.
And just add up the numbers, use your gift range chart. The public phase raises small gifts, less than $5,000. So how many gifts at $100, $200, $500 would you need to raise whatever 50% is? My guess is that, it's more donors than you have in your database, or more donors than you have in your community. And the math will tell you that you can't raise 50% of your goal on small gifts. You will know quickly by doing the math.
So Jay, we're going to turn it back over to you. People want to know when they're going to get their CFRE point.
And the slides.
My gosh, too many questions. No, well, first of all, thank you so much for this. This is excellent. And one of the questions, I'm not sure if it came up or not, is will there be a recording? So the answer is yes. And you'll see this posted to the YouTube channel that is managed by DonorSearch. So if you haven't seen that yet, go over to YouTube. It'll be here there in the next 24 to 48 hours. And in addition, a recording of this will also be posted to the DonorSearch site. Now, you've heard DonorSearch mentioned several times. So if you want to learn more about DonorSearch, or for that matter, your donors, you can check them out at donorsearch.net. There's not only a calendar of what's coming up next, but also this recording will be there along with all the rest under the resources tab. As far as the slides are concerned, that's up to the two of you. So would you like to? How would you like
of course. Well, you can either send us the list and we will send it out, or if we send you the slides, if you can send it out, we can work that out later.
Okay, well, we'll figure that out, and we'll make sure everybody gets the slide deck. So
yes.
Don't worry, you'll get that. But I do hope you'll share this with your colleagues, a link to the recording so they can benefit from it. And then if they want the slides as well, you can always turn to our two presenters.
Yes.
So would you mind just one more time telling people where they can find the two of you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Jay. So visit us at capitalcampaigntoolkit.com, or just email us, Amy at capitalcampaigntoolkit.com or Andrea at capitalcampaigntoolkit.com. But if you go to the website, the Capital Campaign Toolkit website, there's tons of free resources. There's ways to connect with us, and we would love to talk to you about your campaign.
And I do want to encourage everybody, if you like this, to go and take a look at at least 2 sessions that Amy Eisenstein has done with us just recently. You'll find both of those in recorded form, again, once again under the YouTube channel. If you'd like to get your podcasts just by ear, go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find her session there. And we're gradually taking all the sessions that we've done historically, and there are over 500, so it takes some time, and loading those to YouTube as well. So just check that out over at donorsearch.net. One last note before you rotate off, which is that we have a great session coming up next week with Ian McQuillan, who's the director of Rogare. If you're not familiar with their work, they do tremendous work on philanthropy and fundraising around the world. And he'll be talking about whether or not we need a fundraiser's Bill of Rights. No doubt you've heard about the Donor Bill of Rights. I sure hope you have and have it hanging on your wall. Fundraiser's Bill of Rights is another question. So if you're interested in that subject, I hope you'll join us. That's next Thursday, May 26th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have sessions coming up in the podcast, including with Krista Slade, Lisa Greer, and Ava Willis Barksdale. You'll find her session right there under Apple Podcasts. So with that, I want to thank you all for hanging out with us today. And of course, thank so much Andrea Kilstedt, Amy Eisenstein for another great session. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, take care.
Thanks for having us. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.